Anyone here been a part of a failed software engineering project? Everyone's hand should be raised. Come on, let's talk about it. All right, this is 17th century shipbuilding. Oh, did you set the timer? Fuck. This is 17th century shipbuilding and your failed software project, also why your project management sucks. This is the Vasa. Any Swedes in the audience? You probably know this story. This is the Vasa. It was one of the grandest ships built by the Royal Swedish Navy. Completed summer 1628 under the reign of King Gustavus Adolphus. I may have pronounced that right. At the time it was built, it was the most expensive project ever undertaken for the small Swedish nation. 4 p.m., August 10th, 1628, the ship set sail. Lovely day. After sailing less than 1 mile, a light gust of wind caused the Vasa to heel over. Water poured in, the ship sank, and 53 people lost their lives. 350 years later, they were able to recover the ship from the Baltic Sea, and they were able to analyze it, and they got a ton of amazing data. The lessons learned from building complex systems relate to building warships in the 1600s. So the captain survived the sinking, was immediately thrown into jail. He was interrogated, and no shit, these were the actual questions. He swore that the guns had been properly secured and the crew was sober. That was a common thing, I guess. After the investigation, no one was actually punished or found guilty, and it was classified an act of God. So this is actually a cross-section of the Vasa. The fundamental reason why it sank was that it was unstable. You can see a very small amount of ballast at the bottom there. The parallels to how this was built, though, relate perfectly. So 3.5 years earlier, they signed a contract to build 4 ships, 2 108-foot and 2 135-foot ships. The Navy lost 10 ships in battle. The king said, I want the 2 smaller ships now, like we do now. So the Vasa actually started as a smaller 108-foot ship, ended as a much larger one. A couple of months later, requirements changed. The king changed the order, right, to 120-foot length ship he wanted. But due to whatever they were building, they only had enough wood for 111 foot. So they built a 111-foot ship instead. So like, ask for 120, built, it makes no sense at all. So then the king learned Denmark was building a ship with 2 gun decks. So they gotta have 2 gun decks, right? Instead of starting over, they just scaled it up. And so it's worth noting, though, that when the king changed the plan, no one in Sweden, including the shipwrights, had ever built a ship with 2 enclosed gun decks. It's probably fine. When it came to the guns, there were a number of revisions from the king. 12-pound guns, 24-pound gun, 48-pound guns, varying numbers of each. It changed all the time. In the end, they could only actually get 48 of the 64 guns they actually wanted due to time constraints, and they analyzed these guns later in the 1960s. Because of the rush job, the guns were so poor quality that they would likely have failed anyway. So if it didn't sink, it would have probably just blown up. The king also wanted the ship to be outfitted with hundreds of ornate painted carvings. The Vasa was meant to impress and outdo that dastardly Danish ship being built. So they spared no expense, and it all contributed to basically a high center of gravity, and that's the ultimate problem. Measurements taken say that the Vasa was so unstable it would have heeled over at a list of 10 degrees. It was an 8-knot gust, which is like 9 miles an hour, that caused the ship to actually capsize that day. They say the recent calculations of the ship indicate that it would have heeled over in a wind of just half that, which is insane because it's a sailboat. The shipwright became ill and died as part of this project. And it was common at the time that all the designs were in his head, because, you know, fuck documentation. The general manager of the project completely fell apart at this point. So the admiral and the captain did a stability test, something called a lurch test, where you get 30 people and you run back and forth a bunch of times. I swear to God, that's what they actually did. And they had to stop after 3 times because the ship was so unstable it was about to fall over. So now we just add ballast, right? But the design changed so many times there was no room for the ballast, and if they did, the gun ports would be below water. So you're thinking to yourself, why would you launch after the test failed? Even more so, it was found later the shipbuilders weren't even present at the stability test, and they were never told about it. So the king ordered the ship. It was supposed to sail by July 25th, and if it was not ready by then, quote, those responsible would be subject to His Majesty's disgrace. And I have no idea what that means, but I'm sure, you know, you lose your head. The maiden voyage actually ended up being 2 weeks later than originally thought, so they almost got it on time. So what did we learn from the Vasa? The Vasa was launched under strong time constraints to meet a pressing need. Many changes to the operational characteristics were made during construction. Non-existent specifications were not revised during construction. There was poor transition in leadership. No one in Sweden actually had built a ship with 2 gun decks. Many secondary innovations had to be added because of the changing requirements. No one actually knew over this 3.5-year period how much the ship had actually evolved during construction. There was no known scientific methods for actually testing center of gravity or stability. It was launched after a failed test. Who does that? I mean, everyone here, right? We've all done that. And the result of the test was known but not actually communicated. So anyway, those that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat this one, so don't let your next project become the Vasa, and actually if you go to the Vasa site, that's their 404 page, which I thought was friggin' awesome. Anyway, thank you.